Okay, let's talk about something really important. And, they didn't really teach us, there's expedient ways to teach stuff. And there are ways that people will teach something that takes them forever. And I know I repeat myself sometimes, quite often actually. But I am better at getting to the core of a matter pithily, even if I repeat myself about it. A lot of people think, and I bet you do too, and there are very few people that know this, and it should be common knowledge, the speed light. Let's take a common misconception about a speed. Trust me, this is an important video. You should really watch this video, and I really rarely say that. I mean, I do. I rarely say that. Thinking about your speed light, okay? You're outside. You either got a backlit subject, a frontlit subject. I don't care. If you got someone underneath the tree, you're like, well, I don't want to use a speed light because I don't have enough ample ambient light handheld to give the proper illumination to my subject. Okay, well, that's a valid choice, but what is it that you're not understanding about a speed light, and why? Trust me, listen. Why every professional, when they're out and about with a speed light, is like, why that guy packing around a speed light in the daylight? You are thinking, and I know you're thinking this right now, okay? Pay attention. I'm going to try to make this video brief, but important and succinct. You are thinking that this is just to bring up the illumination on your subject. Well, that's one way of thinking about it, but you're really wrong. If you think that, let's say you've got Sally Joe, and she's standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon, and you can see the other rim, 10 miles off in the distance. I actually hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon once. Man, that was some serious pain on my legs. Man, I thought I was going to die. Grand Canyon's huge. Now, here's the question. This sounds like a nonsense until you think about it. And people don't think like this. How on earth is this speed light, which does not stretch out that very far, going to control your exposure on the far end of the Grand Canyon, miles away? You could barely see it. There's just no way in hell, even the most powerful flashlight in the world is ever going to, a powerful laser basically isn't going to, why and how is the speed light going to control the far end of that Grand Canyon? This is what you're missing and why a professional actually packs a speed light, and I want you to peel your ears back and listen to what it is I'm going to say. Because you are under the misconception, most of you are, and it's no big deal, that a speed light is for controlling only the subject that you're actually shooting. I need some fill light. The sun's behind so-and-so's shoulders. Need to add some fill light. Okay, that's perfectly valid. The point that you're missing is ambient light versus shutter speed light. Speed light. I said shutter speed light. The shutter is controlling your ambient exposure. The light that is actually pouring in like a river. Now, I kind of made a video on this last week, but I didn't really nail the succinct point, and this video has to be made by itself. Your speed light, no matter whatever shutter it is you set for your ambient, your speed light illumination is like a gunshot. So you have set the proper exposure for your ambient. Let's say the Grand Canyon. You got Sally and she's backlit and the sun's behind her. I'm going to expose for my ambient. That means I could take hardcore, middle of summer light and tone it down without the speed light. Let's not think about the speed light a second. Tone it down to make it look like it's evening light or whatever light I want. Your speed light lets you control all of that ambient stuff that it can't reach. And this is kind of counterintuitive to how people think. And they don't think in terms of light layering, LL. Light layering. When you have total control over your ambience, whether it's a shrub behind somebody, whether it's the Grand Canyon behind somebody, whether it's a mountain range, 2 miles behind Joe Blow, it's like, hey, and you got the mountains behind them. You can make that have whatever exposure it is that you want, and then you raise your subject up. This is why a speed light, which obviously we all know the speed light ain't reaching out too far. Okay, we know that. You're not going to illuminate Joe Blow standing on the other side of the street over there. I could crank this up to full blast and hit it, and it isn't going to do anything. It's not going to illuminate Joe Blow over there. That's not what I'm talking about. My point is that I can expose for my ambience however I want. I don't have to change my aperture or my shutter speed. All I have to do is change the power output on this and have my subject within shooting range of my speedlight, and that way my speedlight gives me total control not only of my subject but my background. So let's re-examine what the hell this means and why the hell every professional photographer, and I've heard this asked by people before. Back in photo school, and I get asked this in camera stores too. It was like, I saw this professional photographer is shooting this hot model, and he's using a speed light in the daytime. What the hell? There's plenty of light there. No, 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 no. You don't get it. Like, he might have been using 3 p.m. light, dropped down his aperture and shutter speed to make that 3 p.m. light look like 8 p.m. dusk light. There's really nothing that you can truly replicate by doing that make truly those hard orange and yellow glows and the contrast look like the evening light. We all know that. But I can drop my ambience down. I can expose my background however the hell I want, and then all I have to do is change the power output plus or minus here on my speed light, expose my subject, and that means that with this pissy little speed light, I don't care if it's the most powerful speed light or the weakest speed light, as long as you can illuminate your subject, you have full and total control of your subject and your ambient illumination, because you got two different types of light: the light that is streaming in, your ambient light, which is flowing, which your shutter speed is controlling, and then you have another type of light which your aperture is controlling, or the power output on the back of your speedlight. Raise it, lower it, however I need. And this is what's so important. People don't make the connection. This is for fill light. This is for subject light. It's dark outside. I got to hit the sun. Handheld, you're not going to make, if you're shooting a club outdoors and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, unless you got it on a tripod, you're not going to raise up your ambient illumination from pitch black to something awesome. Your subjects are going to be moving a little bit during that time. We're not talking about that. That's kind of a given. We're talking about where there's even just enough ambient illumination that you can handhold it. Okay? And then you add your fill light to your subject, and you've got total control over your subject and your background. It doesn't matter how far the hell away the background is, you're exposing for your ambient, and then you're raising your subject. Speedlights, people think wrongly, are just about controlling their subject, but they're using their speedlight to control absolutely everything, including their background. Your speedlight isn't touching your background, but by the mere fact that you have total control over the exposure value of your subject, you're compressing the dynamic range into whatever the hell it is you want it to look like. Okay, I'm going to expose for my background, I'm going to illuminate for my subject. I don't have so much to screw around in with Lightroom, because instead of my dynamic range of being this and this between background and subject, it's now this and this. And this is easier to work with than this. When your shadow details are like, whoa, I'm going to have to go into Lightroom and screw around with this shot, No. Yeah, you can do that, but that's a waste of time. Time is money. So get your head out of the notion that speedlights are merely for your subject. Because once you're exposing for your ambient, regardless of the speedlight, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. It's like, well, I'm going to make this 3 p.m. light look like 8 p.m. light. Okay. And then you go, well, I've done that. Now here I'm looking at the picture. Now my subject is pitch black. Don't care. Don't care. Dial up your power. Stick it on the face of your subject, or wherever the hell you want to put it. Raise them up to wherever it is that you need to raise them. So you have complete control with a pissy little speedlight over your subject and your background. This is undeniable, it's irrefutable, and nobody talks about this. Nobody thinks on this level. Speedlights for subject illumination. Yeah, that's kind of half the truth. But your speedlight is for control of everything. Because when you expose your background however you want, then you can raise your subject up to however you want. The point of really narrowing it down very, very simply is that if you know that you have 100% control of the lighting of your subject, then all you have to do is expose your background however you want. Well, I've already nailed the illumination for my subject. Well, that's good. Now just set the exposure for... See, that doesn't work in people's mind. They think of one type of exposure. It's like, well, you know, the dynamic range is too far. My subject is here and my background is here. Yeah, but you don't understand that this type of light is like a gunshot, and this type of light is pouring in on my ugly face is like a flow of water. My shutter is going to control the flow of water. My shutter ain't going to control the gunshot. Speedy Gonzales light here, bam, it's already through the shutter. Whether I set my shutter for a 60th of a second or a 250th of a second, as long as it's within sync speed. Speed light don't matter. Yes, there's front curtain sync and there's rear curtain sync. But, you know, your shutter is irrelevant to your speed light. Generally so. Aperture is directly relevant. Power output is obviously directly relevant. All of those are gain, because all exposure is gain in time. But when you adjust the time, what needs to be specified in people's brains is that you're adjusting the time for ambient illumination. Because, well, all exposure is gain in time, time being shutter speed. The time is a controlling factor of this light. The time is not a controlling factor of this light. It is almost in a roundabout way in certain circumstances. But once you pop the flash off, this flash is going like that, and it don't matter if it's a 60th of a second or 250th of a second or 500th of a second. It's getting through the shutter. Fast or slow, it's getting through. And that way you have complete control. And you have complete control of the dynamic range of your subject and your ambient illumination, i.e. your background. And you need to think about that, and that's a very, very important point. Because that's all people think about. And I don't know why more people don't talk about that. They actually didn't teach us that directly in photography school. They did, but they kind of beat around the bush about it. I know I've kind of repeated myself a few times, and I've flapped my lips here in the past, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes. But, you know, I wish they, you know, flapped their lips for 7 or 8 minutes back in photography school, because they went over this subject spread out all over creation for days and weeks. It's like, well, you repeat yourself. Yeah, but I wish back in photography school they kind of put that in a 7-minute blurb, or 8-minute, or however long I've flapped my damn lips for. So, just remember that any shutter speed that you choose to control your ambient exposure, you're adjusting the speedlight power to match your lighting levels on your subject, since you can slip, you know, in any power level to illuminate your subject for the proper exposure that you want to give it as far as this exposure value. And that relative to your ambient. And therefore set the dynamic range of your shot. And when everything falls within the dynamic range of your camera, editing is really easy. I don't like editing. You know, I like cropping and adjusting the white balance and maybe add a little sharpening, but, you know, yeah. Kind of back in the day, we kind of had to nail it in camera. Back in the day, we had to nail it in camera. Now you could Photoshop the hell out of anything. Time is money. You know, I'm of the firm belief that you should spend more time behind your damn camera than you should behind your damn computer. I think it's called photography and not computerography for a reason. You know, when you've turned photography into computerography, Photoshop, Lightroom, then it pretty much is not photography anymore. It's something else. It's a hybrid. Well, I'm going to take a shot, and, you know, what looks like crap, I don't care. I'll Photoshop it for an hour or two. I'll make it look right. I'll make it look right! With the right filter and mask tools and the right levels of sharpening and exposure sliders, I can make this turd look like a piece of gold. Well, I'm not of that school of belief. I wasn't brought up that way. And you shouldn't be either, because time is money. You know, and here's time. 3 hours behind the computer in Photoshop, or getting it right in camera, going click, okay, I got it. Done. One of those is easier than the other. 3 hours behind the computer, or click, done. Yeah, done. Just remember that your speedlight controls everything. It controls your subject, and it controls your background, even if the background is 5 miles away. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand exposure. You should make your background look however you want. Well, that's going to affect my subject. Doesn't matter. It's speedlight. You can make it right up there, right where you want it. Okay? Undeniable, irrefutable. Simplicity is divinity. Lux e veritas. If you like this video, you can drop me a buck or two, or send me a big fat pizza covered in cheese. Just kidding about that part. No, I'm not.